The night Jannik Sinner finally let himself cry. There is a very specific kind of silence that falls over a tennis player when the season finally ends and the adrenaline drains out of the body. For Jannik Sinner, that silence arrived at the close of 2024, and for the first time in a long time, he was not alone inside it. Sitting beside him were the three people who had watched every version of him exist before the world ever learned his name. His mother Siginda, his father Hans-Peter, and his older brother Mark. Cameras were rolling, trophies were stacked, but what Sinner described in that moment had nothing to do with rankings. He spoke about sacrifice. He spoke about the years his parents spent driving through snow at dawn so he could chase a ball on a frozen court. He said, almost quietly, that the victory did not belong to him, it belonged to them. For anyone who has followed his career, that sentence hit differently, because Sinner is not a man prone to theatrical emotion. He is the opposite of spectacle. He is the kid from the Alps who learned early that words are expensive and effort is free. And yet, there he was, admitting on camera that the entire year, the titles, the Grand Slam, the #1, was simply a long thank you letter written in forehands. This is the story we want to unpack across the next 10 chapters. Not the highlight reel, but the human architecture underneath it. The mountain village, the ski lodge, the father who learned to cook for a tour, the mother who stayed home to care for a sick aunt. The silence that becomes strength. If you enjoy tennis stories that go deeper than the scoreboard, the psychology, the family, the quiet decisions that shape champions, consider subscribing to Tennis Insider. We are building a home for fans who want the full picture, not just the trophy shot. Stay with us, because what we are about to uncover about Sinner's family will change the way you watch him play. Every drop shot, every calm stare across the net, every refusal to celebrate too loudly, it all begins in a small house in South Tyrol, with two parents who never once told their son what to become. The Italian first, a trophy heavier than gold. When the ATP handed Jannik Sinner the trophy, recognizing him as the first Italian man in history to finish a season as world #1, something shifted in the room. It was not the usual polite applause of a ceremony. It was the weight of a century of Italian tennis finally tipping over onto one pair of shoulders. Italy has produced icons, Panatta, Barazzuti, Berrettini, but no Italian man had ever stood alone at the summit for a full 52 weeks. Sinner, in his typically understated way, called it the achievement he values most. Not a Grand Slam, not a Masters 1000, the year-end crown. Because the year-end crown is not a moment, it is a verdict. It is the sport saying, across every surface, every opponent, every injury, every red-eye flight, you were the most consistent human on the planet. For a player who grew up skiing down mountains in Sexton, consistency is almost spiritual. Skiers understand that a single twitch, a single lazy turn, ends everything. Sinner brought that discipline onto clay, hard court, and grass, and he refused to let it leak out. What makes the honor deeper is the cultural context. Italy loves tennis, but Italy is a country that worships flair. Totti, Del Piero, Pirlo, the cinematic geniuses of sport. Sinner is not cinematic, he is engineering. He is a metronome with a forehand. And yet, the country has fallen in love with him precisely because he represents a new Italian archetype. Quiet excellence, mountain patience, Northern European calm, fused with Mediterranean heart. The trophy itself, he admits, is more symbol than object. It represents every Italian kid who was told tennis was too expensive, too foreign, too Anglo. It represents a federation that finally built a pipeline. And it represents a boy who once had to choose between skis and a racket. When he lifted that trophy, he was not lifting it for himself. He was lifting it for a country that spent decades waiting, and for two parents in the Alps who never once asked him to hurry. That detail, the not hurrying, is the secret ingredient we will explore next, because Sinner's entire personality is downstream of how his parents refused to pressure him. The trophy that went home to the Alps. Most champions build trophy rooms, marble shelves, custom lighting, a glass case angled for Instagram. Jannik Sinner does something stranger. He sends his trophies home, to a modest house in the Italian Alps where his parents still live the same life they lived before he became famous. When he won the 2025 Australian Open, one of the most prestigious titles in the sport, he announced almost casually that the trophy would not stay with him. It would sit in his parents' living room in Sexton, a village most people cannot pronounce, surrounded by wooden furniture and mountain air. Think about the psychology of that gesture. A 23-year-old athlete at the peak of global fame, with sponsorships, apartments, and access to any luxury he wants, chooses to place his most symbolic object in the house where he used to do homework. It is not performance. It is not PR. It is identity. Sinner understands something that many young stars forget. The trophy is not the achievement. The achievement is the years of 5 a.m. training your mother quietly tolerated, the meals your father prepared after long shifts, the birthdays missed, the school plays unattended. The trophy is simply the receipt. Giving it back to his parents is how he balances the ledger. There is also a deeply alpine logic to it. In mountain communities, the family home is the anchor. You can leave for university, for tennis academies, for the ATP Tour, but the house remains the gravitational center. Every object of meaning eventually finds its way back there. By placing the Australian Open trophy in his parents' living room, Sinner is not just honoring them. He is refusing to let success uproot him. He is telling the universe, I may travel the world, but my center of gravity is still that house, that kitchen, that view of the Dolomites. This is why he plays with such calm under pressure. He is not carrying the weight of his ego into big moments. He is carrying the weight of a quiet house in the mountains, and that weight is oddly light. It reminds him that losing a final does not change who he is. Winning one does not either. The house remains, the parents remain. Everything else is just weather. From a ski lodge kitchen to the top of tennis. Before Jannik Sinner was Jannik Sinner, he was the son of two people who worked in a ski lodge. His father, Hans Peter, was a chef. His mother, Siginda, was a waitress. They lived in Sexton, a small alpine village where winters are long, tourism is seasonal, and the idea of producing a world #1 tennis player is, statistically, absurd. Tennis is expensive. It requires courts, coaches, travel, equipment, and hours that working parents rarely have. And yet, somehow, in that ski lodge ecosystem, a champion was quietly assembled. The first ingredient was work ethic. When your father is cooking dinner service for hundreds of hungry skiers and your mother is carrying trays until midnight, you learn early that effort is not a concept, it is a daily reality. You learn that fatigue is not an excuse. You learn that complaints do not change the outcome. Sinner absorbed this like oxygen.
Watch him today at a 5-set match on a humid Melbourne night, and you will see a player who simply does not break mentally. That is not talent. That is inheritance. The second ingredient was simplicity. The family was not wealthy. There were no private jets, no entourage, no custom equipment. Sinner grew up with exactly what he needed and nothing more. That kind of upbringing teaches you to value craft over flash. It is why his game today is so stripped down. No unnecessary spin, no flamboyant celebrations, no social media theatrics. Just clean, brutal, repeatable tennis. The third ingredient was environment. The Alps are a harsh teacher. The weather does not negotiate. The slopes do not care about your mood. Children raised in mountain villages develop a kind of quiet resilience that city kids rarely match. They understand that nature sets the terms, and you adapt. Sinner's on-court composure, the way he absorbs a bad bounce, a hostile crowd, a questionable call, feels very alpine. It is the shrug of someone who has already survived a blizzard or two. When you combine these three ingredients, work ethic, simplicity, environment, you start to understand that Sinner was not built in an academy. He was built in a ski lodge long before he ever held a professional racket. The academy just sharpened the steel. The fork in the road, skis or a racket. At the age of 13, most kids are worried about homework, acne, and fitting in. Jannik Sinner was making a decision that would shape the rest of his life. He was already a national-level champion skier, fast, fearless, and widely expected to represent Italy on the slopes one day. And then he walked away from it. He chose tennis. To understand how extraordinary this is, you have to understand what skiing meant to his community. In South Tyrol, skiing is not a hobby, it is a culture. A national-level junior skier is a local hero. Coaches invest years in you. Sponsors begin circling. The path is laid out like a freshly groomed piste. Choosing tennis instead was, in that context, almost heretical. And yet, his parents did not object. This is the part of the story that feels almost unbelievable in modern sports parenting. Today, parents routinely push children into specialization before they can tie their own shoelaces. They mortgage houses for tennis academies. They project their dreams onto small shoulders. Hans-Peter and Siginda did the opposite. They looked at their 13-year-old and said, "We will not pressure you. We will not steer you. We will simply support whatever you choose." Sinner has said in interviews that this freedom, the absence of parental expectation, was the single greatest gift he ever received. It allowed him to love tennis for itself, not for what it could do for his family. That distinction matters enormously. Players who are pushed often burn out. Players who are pulled by their own curiosity tend to last. Sinner is a textbook case of the second type. There is also something profoundly counterintuitive about how his skiing background fed into his tennis. Skiing trained his balance, his lower body explosiveness, his ability to read terrain in microseconds. Watch him slide into a backhand on clay and you can almost see the skier in him. Weight centered, knees bent, eyes ahead. The sport he abandoned never really left him. It simply transferred its skills into a new language. The fork in the road, then, was not really a fork. It was a translation. He did not stop being a mountain athlete. He just put down his skis and picked up a racket. And his parents, in their quiet alpine wisdom, let him do it without a single word of resistance.
Leaving home at 14, the cruelty of potential. Ask any parent what their greatest fear is, and many will say the same thing: letting go too early. Hans-Peter and Siginda had to face that fear when Jannik was 14 years old. To pursue tennis seriously, he had to leave Sexton and train hundreds of miles away, at an academy far from the Alps, far from home-cooked dinners, far from the rhythm of family life. 14. Let that number sit for a moment. Most 14-year-olds cannot do their own laundry. Sinner was packing his bags, boarding trains, and moving into a dormitory in a town he barely knew. He has spoken openly about how difficult this was, not for him, but for his parents. He recognizes with unusual maturity that the hardest sacrifice was theirs, not his. They had to watch their son grow up in fast forward, through phone calls and occasional visits, knowing that every month he spent at the academy was a month they would never get back. For Sinner himself, the move forced a kind of accelerated adulthood. He had to manage his own schedule, his own meals, his own homesickness, his own injuries. There was no parent in the next room to soften bad days. He describes this period as the one that taught him true independence, the ability to handle his own chores, his own emotions, his own disappointments. Many young players crack under this pressure. The statistics on tennis academy dropouts are brutal. For every Sinner, there are hundreds of teenagers who fly home within a year, broken by the loneliness. What kept him going was, paradoxically, the very thing he had left behind: the image of his parents waiting in the Alps. The knowledge that they had released him not because they wanted him gone, but because they trusted him enough to let him try. That trust became his armor. It is worth pausing on how this episode reveals his parents' philosophy. They did not helicopter. They did not micromanage. They gave him roots deep enough that he could travel far without drifting. This is the quiet genius of their parenting style, security without suffocation. Every time you see Sinner walk calmly onto a center court in front of 20,000 strangers, remember that he has been walking alone since he was 14, carrying the invisible weight of two people who believed in him enough to let him go. Dad joins the tour, as a chef, not a coach. One of the most charming and revealing details of the 2025 season happened at Indian Wells. Jannik Sinner's father, Hans-Peter, joined the tour. Fans assumed he was there to watch, to coach, to advise. He was not. He was there to cook. A former professional chef, Hans-Peter stepped into the team's kitchen and simply started preparing meals for Jannik, for his coaches, for his support staff. No press conference, no Instagram reveal. Just a father quietly doing what he does best so his son could eat the food he grew up on while competing at the highest level. Think about what this tells us. Sinner has access to the best nutritionist in the world. He could hire any chef he wants. Instead, the most important meals of his season were cooked by his dad. That is not a nutrition decision. That is an emotional one. Food from a parent carries a frequency that no professional meal plan can replicate. It tastes like childhood. It tastes like Sunday. It tastes like the world still makes sense even when you are thousands of miles from home playing in front of hostile crowds. There is also a beautiful role reversal in this arrangement. For most of Sinner's career, his father was the provider, working shifts, paying bills, sacrificing time. Now, at the peak of his son's success, Hans-Peter continues to provide, but in a new language.
The same hands that once cooked for ski tourists in a small alpine lodge were now cooking for the world #1. The continuity is stunning. Nothing about the father's identity has been inflated by his son's fame. He is still, fundamentally, a chef. And when Jannik eats a plate of pasta his dad made in a rented kitchen in California, he is eating a piece of Sexton. That is strategic advantage. Opponents can train harder. They can hire better teams. They cannot replicate the psychological steadiness of a player whose father is quietly making him lunch between matches. It anchors him. It reminds him, in the middle of the circus, that he is still someone's son. And in a sport where loneliness eats champions alive, having your father in the kitchen is perhaps the most underrated competitive edge on the entire tour. Why his parents missed the biggest matches? If you scan the player boxes at Grand Slam finals, you will notice something curious about Jannik Sinner's matches. His parents are often not there. For a champion of his stature, this would normally be scandalous. Commentators would speculate, tabloids would dig. But the truth, once you know it, is almost unbearably beautiful. Hans-Peter and Siginda often stay home in South Tyrol because they are caring for aging grandparents and a sick aunt. They are not absent, they are present, just present for someone else. Their priorities are not glamorous. They're the kind of priorities that do not make headlines. Holding the hand of an elderly relative, driving to a pharmacy, making soup for a sibling in pain. In a world that rewards visibility, they have chosen invisibility, and their son loves them more for it. Sinner has spoken about how emotionally he dedicated his 2024 US Open victory to that sick aunt. Behind the trophy, behind the confetti, behind the global broadcast, there was a woman in a quiet house in the Alps whom he was thinking about. That dedication was not a media line. It was a confession. It told the world that for Sinner, family health outranks tennis glory, and that his biggest wins are only meaningful because they are offered upward as gifts to people who cannot be in the stadium. This ethos has enormous consequences for his mindset on court. Many players crack under the pressure of performing in front of their parents. They feel watched, they feel judged. Sinner has learned to play without that gaze, and paradoxically, it has made him freer. He carries his family internally, not externally. They live inside his chest, not in a seat 12 rows up. There is also a lesson here about how we define success. Most ambitious people would sacrifice family for achievement. Sinner's parents sacrifice achievement for family. They miss finals so that aunts do not miss dignity. They miss trophies so that grandparents do not miss company. This is the moral universe their son grew up in, and it explains so much about his quiet humility. He simply cannot take himself too seriously. He was raised by people who believe that a sick aunt matters more than a silver plate, and that belief is stitched into every point he plays. The coach's secret: a family that doesn't talk tennis. Simone Vagnozzi, one of Jannik Sinner's key coaches, once made a comment that quietly explains half of his players' success. He described Sinner's parents as wonderful, not because they are passionate fans, not because they strategize, not because they obsess over opponents, but because they barely discuss tennis during tournaments at all. Let that sink in. During the most high-stakes weeks of a season, when most tennis parents are drowning their children in analysis, Sinner's mother and father simply do not bring it up. They ask about his sleep. They ask about the weather.
They ask if he has eaten. They ask if he called his brother. Tennis is left on the court, where it belongs. This is an extraordinarily rare environment at the top of the sport. Tennis history is littered with cautionary tales of parents who became coaches, agents, psychologists, and critics all at once. The pressure cooker those dynamics create has ended careers prematurely and destroyed relationships in the process. Sinner's parents, by refusing to participate in that machinery, have given their son something priceless: a zone where he is not an athlete. He is just Jannik. Just their boy, just someone who needs dinner and a hug. That zone is where his nervous system recovers. That zone is why he can walk onto Rod Laver Arena and play with an almost inhuman calm. He has a refuge that most champions do not. When he loses, his parents do not replay the points with him. When he wins, they do not inflate his ego. They simply love him at the same temperature, regardless of the scoreboard. Vagnozzi's comment hints at a deeper coaching philosophy too. A player's performance ceiling is partly determined by the noise around him. If the family adds noise, the ceiling drops. If the family adds silence, the ceiling rises. Sinner's ceiling is, at this moment, the highest in men's tennis. And one of the quiet reasons for that is the silence his parents provide. They are the soundproofing in his life. They absorb the chaos so that when he steps on court, all he hears is the ball. For every young player, and every parent of a young player, there is a masterclass hidden in this simple fact. Sometimes the best thing you can say about your child's sport is nothing at all. The quiet blueprint behind a world number one. If you zoom out and stack all 9 stories together, a blueprint emerges. Jannik Sinner's greatness is not a mystery. It is a logical consequence of a specific family architecture. Mountain roots, relentless work ethic, simplicity over excess, freedom without pressure, independence forced early, a father who cooks, a mother who stays behind to care for the sick, parents who refuse to talk tennis, a trophy that lives in a small alpine house. Put those ingredients into any child, and you do not necessarily get a world number one, but you do get a human being who is nearly impossible to break. The ranking is almost a side effect. What is most striking about Sinner is how deliberately unmodern his story feels. In an era of sports parents chasing viral clips of their 7-year-olds, his parents did the opposite of everything trending. They did not brand him. They did not push him. They did not exploit him. They just fed him, trusted him, released him, and waited. That patience, that refusal to accelerate, is the secret. Tennis is a sport that punishes haste. It rewards the player who can stay calm 1 point longer, 1 game longer, 1 match longer. Sinner's entire personality was engineered for exactly this rhythm. And it was engineered not by a performance coach, but by 2 alpine parents who believed that childhood should not be optimized. There is a lesson here that goes far beyond sport. In a world that constantly tells us to do more, post more, prove more, the Sinner family whispers the opposite message. Do less, love more, stay rooted. The scoreboard eventually will take care of itself. If this kind of deeper story is what you come to tennis for, the family behind the forehand, the psychology behind the silence, the long, quiet years behind the loud trophy moments, then Tennis Insider is the channel built for you. We are not chasing highlight reels. We are chasing the truth underneath them. Subscribe, stay with us, and let us keep pulling back the curtain on the humans who shape this sport.
Jannik Sinner did not become the best player in the world by accident. He became it because, somewhere in the Alps, two parents chose love over pressure, and the rest of us are only now beginning to understand what that really cost them and what it gave him.